science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction. Fiction. Fiction.
Tris majestic salutations, all you cognonauts out there, and welcome to Exofathom, the show that explores the outside reaches of understanding. I am your host, Nick, and I am joined, as always, by my two lovely co-hosts, Ayla and Mike. Ayla, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay for a Monday evening. How are you?
Oh, well, can't complain. We live together.
Yeah. True.
Mike, how you doing?
It's a happy Monday.
That's good. Happy Mondays are always good. I mean, you know, it's better than sad Mondays or manic Mondays.
I like Manic Mondays, though, because I always think of the song, and then I'm like...
Well, that's why I said it, yeah.
It comes with the beat.
It does.
Well, yeah, thank you guys for joining me, obviously. And thank you guys for listening out there in the internet land. We really appreciate you guys. Feel free to give us a comment or a shout out or any feedback that you might have on all of our socials. We are at Exofathom, all one word. You can find us basically any of the socials that you have except for Twitter, because that place is a cesspool. But aside from that, the topic we're going to get in today, and this is kind of a meaty subject. I think I bit off a little bit more than I can chew, but we're going to just put our heads down and plow right through it. The topic for this evening is the 7 principles of Hermeticism. Now, before I get into all of the sort of definitions and explanations, I just wanted to get your initial ideas or concepts right off the bat. So, Ayla, are you familiar at all with Hermeticism? Are you familiar with any of this stuff, or is this something totally foreign to you?
It sounds pretty foreign. I might have my memory jogged at some point, but for the most part, I am a student tonight. And if I had to take a best guess, I don't know, we're in for how to learn how to be a hermit instruction.
Actually, a hermit crab.
A hermit crab, yes.
It's the 7 principles of life for the hermit crab. Just so
you know. Is it really?
No.
See, I'm ready to
Maybe
learn.
it is. I don't know hermit crab.
I think it should be. Hey, a hermit crab is pretty happy. They got their little spot.
They steal people's houses. Yeah.
Do they? No, yeah. They make their house out of trash.
Usually
they do both.
They do both. What about you, Mike? Do you have any sort of familiarity with the concept?
And what do you know about hermit crabs?
Well, as being a hermit crab, I find it highly offensive that we think we steal people's houses. It's just the hierarchies and the way that natural systems work. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Mr. Crab.
But I've come in passing with Hermeticism. I kind of got interested in alchemy and the history behind that a little bit, I guess, or more specifically, like emotional alchemy or that notion. And just kind of like picked it up and put it down, sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think that, you know, there's a lot of interesting stuff in the text of all of this, and we're going to go through the 7 principles alone. We're not necessarily going to get into the real deep esoteric knowledges of Hermeticism, because they're tied with Kabbalism and really ancient Egyptian schools, mystery schools and stuff like that. But this is going to focus more on just the 7 principles that was kind of distilled from all of the ancient mystery schools and then published in the 1900s. So yeah, so sweet. That's cool. I mean, I'm glad that this is going to be something new for both of you guys, relatively. But I think that what you're going to find as we get into this is that you're very familiar with all of these concepts already, and they're concepts that have already kind of you've been familiarized with, and they kind of permeate through our culture. So this is
indoctrinated.
Yeah, I mean, not indoctrinated, but it's interesting to see how it permeates through most of our life and kind of the more modern new agey philosophies and things like that, and a little bit of duality and Buddhism and Zoroastrianism. It's got a little bit of everything in it. So
Quite
um,
eclectic.
yeah, it's very eclectic, but it's so basically, let me just jump right into the introduction. Hermeticism, also called Hermetism, is a religious, philosophical, and esoteric tradition based primarily on the writings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, which is the thrice greatest Hermes. These writings have greatly influenced the Western esoteric tradition and were considered to be of a great importance during the Renaissance and the Reformation. The tradition traces its origin to Prisca Theologia, a doctrine that affirms the existence of a single true theology that is present in all religions and was given by God to man in antiquity. Now, before I get in any deeper, I was trying to find the definitive origin of Hermeticism. Now, there are more modern schools that kind of adopted the philosophies and kind of coined the term Hermeticism. This kind of happened in the 1500s during the Renaissance in Europe. But the claims are that all of these teachings are actually much older than that, and that they come from even before ancient Egypt and ancient Greece, that these are passed down traditions through mystery schools that have kind of been aggregated all together into some sort of doctrine that was carried on through the ages by secret societies and such. But I couldn't find a definitive, hard line. This is when it was created. This was the philosophy, the birth of the philosophy. So take everything we say here with a grain of salt, because a lot of it is conjecture, and some of it is a little bit of woo, but there is some merit to all of this. I wanted to get into one of the first symbols of Hermeticism, and actually one of the most ancient symbols there is. And the symbol of Hermeticism is the caduceus. We had discussed this in what episode was that? we talked about the caduceus when we were talking about
The staffs and stuff.
yes,
Somewhere along the deity series.
And the Biden.
And
Yeah.
That's right.
The
Okay.
Hades or Poseidon.
Yeah. Poseidon. Okay. Yeah. So we definitely got into the caduceus a little bit, but for those who may not be aware, the caduceus is the staff carried by Hermes in Greek mythology, and consequently by Hermes Trismegistus in Greco-Egyptian mythology. It is a short staff entwined by two serpents, sometimes surmounted by wings. In Roman iconography, it was often depicted as being carried in the left hand of Mercury, the messenger of the gods. Some accounts suggest that the oldest known imagery of the caduceus has its roots in Mesopotamian origin, with the Sumerian god, and it's Ningishzida, whose symbol, a staff with two snakes intertwined around it, dates back to 4000 to 3000 BC. So these are very old symbols that we're talking about. And indeed, this sort of philosophy, if can be related and relayed this far back, is quite old as well. We also have the concept of Hermes Trismegistus. Now, this is a kind of an interesting character in the Greco-Egyptian mythology. What's interesting about him is that he is an amalgam of two different gods. He's an amalgam of the Greek Hermes, who is the messenger god, and then the Egyptian Thoth, who is the god of literature and art and a lot of other things. It's interesting is that during this time, Greeks and Egyptians were trading with each other and exchanging culture very regularly. So this Hermes Trismegistus kind of was born from the two cultures and then became this third entity, hence the word Trismegistus, which means 3 times great. He wasn't just Hermes, he wasn't just Thoth, he was also this amalgamation. And so Hermes Trismegistus may be associated with the Greek god Hermes and Egyptian god Thoth. And the Greeks in the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt recognized the equivalence of Hermes and Thoth through the Interpretario Gracia. Consequently, the two gods were worshipped as one in what had been the temple of Thoth in Kemenu, which was known in the Hellenistic period as Hermopolis. So it's really interesting that this kind of mixture of cultures bore this new sort of entity. I don't know if you guys have anything to say so far. I mean, I have a lot of reading to do. So if you guys have initial thoughts just off the get-go, please, Leanne, let me know.
That merging of gods is interesting because like you see influences of cultures play out later, like in Jewish text you'll find Greek influences, and it makes sense that it goes that far back, and it like on the conspiracy end makes a lot of sense that we can't find the exact date or who exactly made these ideas up.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting in that respect. Ayla, what do you think?
Well, it reminds me of this Silmarillion, the Lord of the Rings pretext, where they talk about like mythology and gods, because it's like really long name, son of really long name, cousin of really long name, in the temple of really long name. So I don't know. My mind. I don't think I have enough like factual anchor points to really like absorb the gravity of like this wide swath of time and information. But it is interesting. I mean, like these concepts are so old and they've been around forever, and it's like we're now at the point in time where you can really appreciate all of that time and that wealth of knowledge too.
Yeah, and it's really, to me, it's very cool the way the two ancient cultures, really the powerhouse cultures of the sort of Western, even though Egypt was in Africa, it still had, we still take heavily from Egypt in the Western world. So it's interesting how these two kind of powerhouses merged, especially within their deity subset. And so what I wanted to do was kind of break down Hermes in the Greek mythology and then Thoth in the Egyptian mythology, give you guys a better idea of who this Hermes Trismegistus might be. So in Hermes, the Greek god is considered the herald of the gods. He's also considered the protector of human heralds, travelers, thieves, merchants, and orators. He is able to move quickly and freely between the worlds of the mortal and the divine, aided by his winged sandals. Hermes plays the role of a psychopomp or soul guide, a conductor of souls into the afterlife. I really like that word, psychopomp, by the way.
Yeah, that's a good word.
It's a really good word.
Make it a shirt.
I know, it might be. Conversely, Thoth, the Egyptian god, played many vital roles and prominent roles in Egyptian mythology. He was the maintainer of the universe, and being one of two deities who stood on either side of Ra's solar barge. I didn't know how Ra had a solar barge, but that sounds really awesome.
Make it a shirt.
In the later history of Egypt, Thoth became heavily associated with the arbitration of godly disputes, the arts of magic, and the system of writing, and the development of science, and even the judgment of the dead. So if we're going to wrap these two kind of mythological characters into one, and I think it'll become more clear once we go into the principles, but there's something that popped out, at least for me right away, with Hermes being the go-between between the worlds of men and gods. And there's something about these principles that kind of not necessarily allow a doorway between the world of man and God, but definitely break down some of the barriers of mystery. And I think that that's kind of an interesting embodiment that Hermes kind of has. And, as well, Thoth became the god of magic and science. And he was heavily into, this concept of art and philosophy. And so it would make sense that these mystery schools that were around in ancient Greece and Egypt, which there are many, I would love to do a episode on the mystery school of Eleusis, which is the secret psychedelic mystery school that all the Greeks went to, at least the important ones. But we'll have to do that on another day. But I think it's kind of an interesting sort of mixture of ideas, and it makes sense to me as to why these principles might have carried over for so long. So we didn't know as humans, as lay people, I would say, about these sort of teachings of Hermeticism until the Kybalion was published. Now, these wisdoms and teachings were taught through mystery schools and secret societies, allegedly ever since their conception in ancient Greece and ancient Egypt. Now, what the Kybalion does is it creates a distillated sort of philosophy that was widely distributed to the masses in 1908. So it was originally published in 1908 under the pseudonym of the quote, Three Initiates, and is a book claiming to be the essence of the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus. The three initiates who authored the Kybalion chose to remain anonymous. As a result, a great deal of speculation is made about who actually wrote the book. It is believed that teachings of Hermeticism can be traced back. I already got through that. And so, okay, before I get into the principles of Hermeticism, I think it's interesting, and I want to bring up that this stuff wasn't actually widespread knowledge until 1908. What's a little bit bizarre to me is why would, and I want to get your guys' answer to this, why would it be published anonymously? Is it to kind of amplify the woo around it, or is it because people who would release this information might be punished for it? What do you guys think?
Well, I think it depends on what these core principles end up being, since I'm still a student here. I can't look into the future, but I'm happy to answer this question once we get to the end of the podcast. But anytime someone's publishing something under a pseudonym, I think it just means that they carry the possibility of some sort of negative affect should they be associated with it in the time that they published it. So I think that that'll be kind of interesting to see, as the ideas come out, how they juxtapose against the popular mindset of the zeitgeist of 1908.
I think it has to be to protect yourself, because these practices are outside of religion, or outside of orthodoxy. And Christianity can be pretty mean to heretics and the non-orthodox, the heretics. So it just might have been like a way to protect themselves from like their actual lives,
Right.
especially if it's handed down throughout time. Like you have the Inquisition, you have the witch trials, you have all these persecutions. Like practicing magic, I'm pretty sure would be seen as devil worship, and then you're dead. So I think they were worried about being punished.
I would tend to agree with you, especially the sort of vitriol the public has surrounding secret societies. Usually when we figure out that there's a secret society that exists, we also figure out that they're up to no good. So I'm sure that if you're wanting to release this type of information, it's best to do it anonymously. And so I guess let's just jump into the 7 principles. I've teased it long enough. I've buried the lead long enough. And I'm just going to run through all 7, and then we'll break each one down individually. And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts when we go through them all. So first principle is principle number 1, the principle of mentalism, or the all is mind. The universe is mental. Principle 2 is the principle of correspondence. So I'm sure you guys are aware of the term as above, so below, as below, so above. That's the principle of correspondence. Number 3 is the principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Number 4 is the principle of polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. And number 5 is the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. Number 6 is the principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized, and there are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes that law. Number 7, and this is the final one, is the principle of gender. Is that gender is in everything, and it's masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes, throughout all individuals, throughout everything. So before I jump into number 1, Ayla, is there any one of those that kind of stands out to you more than the others?
Well, yeah, two. Well, gosh, I think, that is so interesting. I would say that the one about the mind, the first one, I really liked that one because, when you think about it, all of our experiences, they're getting filtered through a mind. And I know that, it's a powerful thing. One of my favorite quotes is that the mind can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven. So, yeah, I really like that one.
Yeah, I like that one too. And I like that it's the first one because it makes me feel like, I don't know if there's any hierarchy to these principles, but it definitely makes me feel like that's one of the most, the highest principle. Mike, what about you? What stands out to you?
Well, the mentalism, of course, like that tying back to the notion of like sunyata and stuff, where you have an objective reality and a subjective reality in this way. It's like every part of reality is mental. So I do like that. But the one that I cherish, or the one that I've found most useful, has been the principle of polarity. And that's because it does it allows you to see that two seemingly different things come from the same base field. And that's what I thought was cool.
Yeah, I like that one a lot too, because I think that makes, especially in a very polarizing environment that we as humans find ourselves in 2020, there's something very holistic and healing about the concept of duality, and that, there's yes and no and, both, and yes and no are on the same coin, and it's all the same sort of energetic field.
If you get into like Aztec philosophy stuff too, that idea of yes and no would just be like, it's all one word, so it just becomes one idea. So that duality gets encapsulated in the one as well. And there's interesting little parallels between Hermeticism and, or at least so far, between Hermeticism and Aztec philosophy, which kind of plays back to that idea that we're touching on really, really old ideas.
Right. Ideas that have been kind of shared by, I would say, probably all religions in some respect. I believe that as far as the as above, so below line goes, the what is it called? In the Christian, there's a Christian quote that's like, the kingdom of God is in the heart of man, or something like that. But it's that concept of like, everything that manifests in this macrocosm is also a manifestation in the microcosm. But before we get too deep into that one, let's jump into the first principle, and that's the principle of mentalism. And that was, the all is mind, the universe is mental. And so I have a little bit of an intro here, and then we're going to jump into some articles I have to share with you guys that kind of back this all up. And I tried my best to keep the articles as reputable as possible, although a lot of this is hard to find from reputable sources. So we'll see. But let's see. The principle of mentalism embodies the idea that all is mind. everything that happens has to be a result of a mental state which precedes it. For anything to exist, thoughts have to form first, which then form physical reality or manifestation. So, super simple kind of description there. Doesn't really need a whole lot of further explanation. But I wanted to share with you guys these couple of articles here that I could find about this topic of the mental universe, as it were. And this one is from Huffington Post or HuffPost.com, and it says, "Your brain is the universe." And this is part one. I'm not going to read into the entire article, but I did pull an excerpt here that might give us a little bit more information. And then I want to get your guys' thoughts about all of this too. So it says, if the universe is encoded in the brain, then perhaps insights that scientists and philosophers have had in the past, breakthrough thoughts about reality, are not to be so mysterious. Einstein was astonished that relativity, a theory formulated in his mind, turned out to match nature's workings with incredible mathematical precision. Such astonishment has evolved beyond amazement by now. The brain is now being examined in the light of quantum biology, and it is dawning that thinking involves quantum operations at the basis where ions exchange charges, thus exchanging information in a precise, even digital way down to a finer level where normal interactions between particles cease. People do unexpected, strange, weird, and spooky things. So do quanta. If their weirdness is entangled with ours, then there is more than resemblance, parallels, and coincidence. The same source is at work for the stars, brains, and thinking. Perhaps we're all tapping into cosmic knowledge, the ultimate software, acting as a portal from one piece of hardware to another, from the brain to reality out there. Using the same build for hardware, nature has allowed us to enter our mental universe, only to discover the infinitude of the conscious universe. Infinity is hard to think about, but happily, our brains keep evolving. Having evolved to the point that we can now look out there and see incredible mathematical orderliness, we've reached the horizon where reality may reveal its true source. Now, this article goes on and it talks about basically what we all get into when we talk about this type of stuff, which is quantum and quantum weirdness and superposition of electrons. And they kind of posit that if the brain acts in the same sort of way, then we are likely creating the reality that we see around us. Now, I have a question for you guys. Have you guys ever experienced that sort of phenomenon in which you've created something in your mind that may or may not have been real?
That may or may not have been real. Yes.
I know that we create things in our fantasies that aren't real all the time, but I think it's interesting. Maybe let me word that better because I have a better.
I would say it depends on how you observed my creation.
That is a fair point. I think my question is probably better poised. Have you ever had an idea that you didn't know, or maybe an answer to something that you actually didn't know but kind of pulled out of thin air, like almost tapping into a collective sort of consciousness?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
I usually find it in the case of writing. This is where I don't like certain symbols I'll pick, or certain things that it seems to be just like a flow state. Mm-hmm. When I'm writing, I'll go back and find, it's been used before or something like that. Yeah, and it gets weird. It does feel like you're tapping into like this the unconscious database of knowledge, and you don't really know you kind of fumble around it because you're not experienced enough in it to find things. But yeah, I mean that's the typical vibe I get from it. Like it's like fumbling around in ancient wisdom.
Yeah, tapping into something and we're going to get into that in another article soon. But it's kind of like tapping into something, this sort of collective consciousness, if you will, or some sort of higher vibrational energy. And I think that that sort of concept, though we haven't really been able to definitively prove it, it would definitely lend itself to the theory that our universe and our reality is manipulated at least by our cognition.
I would agree too. And like I think what I wonder is like these ideas I get, do all of the mics get the same idea? Like are as a collective am I when that quantum phenomenon happens, does it pop from one mic to a different mic? Or is it a group effort and all mics have this one mic idea?
I don't know. I mean, I would say yes, both to both, right? Maybe all mics have one idea, and then another separate of all, or separate collection of all mics have different ideas. And if we're talking about infinity here, it's like there can be multiple infinities, I suppose, right?
You have different sets of infinity, so you could look at your life as one subset of all of reality, I guess. So you have an infinite amount of infinite infinite amount of infinite paths. However, it's not the same size of the infinite as the total reality of the infinite. Your infinity is smaller.
Yes, that's true. That is very true. Some infinities are bigger than others. Ayla, do you have any thoughts, or are you just kind of trying to absorb?
I'm just trying to absorb, because, I definitely had moments where I felt like an answer to a question came to me and it wasn't really like originating from me, which is hard to say, but usually it's like something mundane, like a number problem or whatever. And then sometimes it's more like deeper, where it's like I'm having a moment and of stress or something, and then all of a sudden like a solution pops out. And and I think it's interesting that when you zoom in on the brain and like all of the like synapses and electrical connections that are going on, it really starts to look more and more like the universe. And so like on a observable level, I mean, it makes sense too.
Yeah, that's true. And I think I have that photo at some point too in this presentation. But as it relates to mushroom root systems, which is kind of cool. But we'll get into that in a minute. I wanted to also say that, not just necessarily, I think we kind of conceptualize this a little bit too grandiose sometimes, where we think that like, oh, I'm going to meditate and then I'm going to have all the answers in the universe and I'll be omniscient. And then basically my third eye will start glowing and I'll start levitating off the ground,
Whoa, calm down. Calm down.
Right. But I think it's much more simple than that. And I think there's something that we kind of overlook that we take for granted sometimes. And that thing is called intuition. And I think that intuition and instinct play a role in that tapping in of the mental universe, of that sort of connection. You get a feeling about something, you get an intuition about something, and you don't know why you have it. You don't know whether it's right or not, but you go with it. I think that when we can distill it down to that level, it becomes a lot more attainable for people than kind of like creating this thing where we're all floating, 6 inches from the ground.
Yeah, there's this interesting idea about that Nietzsche brings up, that throughout our modernization we have actually lost touch with the divine beast in us. And the way to get back to that divine beast is through intuition. Like as a human, as you start to trust your instinct and intuition, it builds like a muscle and it becomes stronger to lead you down the right direction, I guess, or at least down a direction. It may not always be right, but it's the way to build that sort of intuitive feel,
bring back that connection. And I would definitely agree with that, because you got to think the concept of animals and the way they interact in nature. Animals interact telepathically with their environment, and they're not necessarily thinking in a high order of cognition. They're thinking on a baser level. Now obviously we've evolved past that lower level of cognition, but we probably left something behind along the way. And that would be the telepathy angle of our brain's ability.
I mean, like when natural disasters happen, you see animals somehow know to flee before it ever comes around. and you have humans sort of standing there scratching their heads like, why are all these animals acting weird? What's
Yeah.
up with this? You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this next article I have is from nature.com, and it's an article about the mental universe. And the subline is this: the only reality is mind and observations, but observations are not things. To see the universe as it really is, we must abandon our tendency to conceptualize observations as things. That's kind of a very sort of hoity-toity subline there, but there's a paragraph I wanted to pull up here for you guys, and the paragraph is: the more recent physics revolution of the past 80 years has yet to transform general public understanding in a similar way, and yet a correct understanding of physics was accessible even to Pythagoras. According to Pythagoras, numbers is all things, and numbers are mental, not mechanical. Likewise, Newton called light particles, knowing the concept to be an effective theory, useful but not true. As noted by Newton's biographer Richard Westphal, the ultimate cause of atheism, Newton asserted, is the notion of bodies having, as it were, a complete, absolute, and independent reality in themselves. Newton knew that Newton's rings and knew of Newton's rings and was untroubled by what is shallowly called the particle wave duality. This is talking about the quantum mechanics of light and that.
Yep.
In 1925, the discovery of quantum mechanics solved the problem of the universe's nature. Bright physicists were again led to believe that the unbelievable, this time that the universe is mental. According to Sir James Jean, the stream of knowledge is heading towards a non-mechanical reality. The universe begins to look more like a great thought than like a great machine. Our mind no longer appears to be an accidental intruder into the realm of matter. We ought rather hail it as the creator and governor of the realm of matter. But physicists have not yet followed Galileo's example and convinced everyone of the wonders of quantum mechanics. As Sir Arthur Eddington explained, it is difficult for the matter-of-fact physicists to accept the view that the substratum of everything is of mental character. So this article goes on to talk about how obviously, pardon me, quantum physics kind of blew the lid off of the mechanical universe and started to allow people to see the universe more as a thought than a machine. And I thought that was a really interesting comparison, because what do you think that means? Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. What do you guys think that means, that the universe is more like a thought than a machine?
Well, immediately I start to think about the struggle that people back in the day had with reconciling their faith and science. I think it was really hard to have scientific discoveries that might run counter to whatever the predominant religion was. And then I know that a lot of philosophers have pondered these dualities. How can God and science exist? And so a lot of times you get this this idea that like the Big Bang is like a thought. And there's a lot of, there's like thousands of texts on the nature of what is. But I do think that it's interesting that there was this concept that it would run like a machine. Like, what does that look? What does that look like? Like you envisioned cogs, and I guess I could see that, like planets kind of rotate around each other. Like in a machine, you have little cogs, or like a clock. But I don't know, something about having it be a thought, because a clock example for to offer that's going to be really regimented. It's going to have a really set system of principles, and it's always on time, right? But if it's a thought, it does make sense that it'd be more along the entropy of the universe, which is to say more chaotic, more unpredictable. And I like that idea better, because I feel like truth only exists in closed systems. So the truth of the clock might exist for the clock, but once you expand that scope and the clock is now on a table that's balancing on water on the planet Zolo, it can be a whole other reality that you're dealing with.
Right. Yeah. And I think, oh, go for it, Mike. Sorry.
No, I'm still churning in my head, so go for it.
No, I just wanted to say that it's interesting because you said, why would the universe be looked at as a machine? And I'm kind of thinking that maybe perhaps the more mechanical physicists, the founders of physics, were trying to reconcile God and science as well. And it would seem to me that perhaps a better explanation for God, or maybe the absence of God, is a universe that works in a very regimented way. Because then you can explain everything, and you can set your clock to it, and it has something that's solid and stable and something that we can build a foundation on. What's funny about that is that with the advent of quantum physics, it kind of breaks that foundation down again, and then we're back to this concept that it is thought. And it's interesting to me because I wonder if this leads us back to God.
Well, I think if you were to define God as that which we don't know, then yeah, everything that we don't know would be this God, which is really just a placeholder for the limits of our understanding. Because again, like with the example of the planet Zolo that I offered, like we have physics which is observed on our planet in our solar system. But then that's getting changed all the time when you start to zoom further and further away. What does the physics look like in a black hole? And then if that black hole were a wormhole or something and it leads to somewhere else, who's to say our quote physics works the same way over there? And so in the face of so much uncertainty, I almost feel like God is that placeholder sometimes, which, obviously in my heart, I feel like it's something more spiritual and woo, but, just in terms of like semantics or whatnot, that's kind of where it makes me think of.
I think I think the system, I think that the system is supposed to be both thought and machine. Like, we trace philosophy, go forward, you get your religion, your God, then you get science, and then science is all about kind of, debunking God as those unknowns, But as we start to drift towards like the atomic age, you start to drift back into like ideas and poetry about the atom and, quantum mechanics, of course. So now you're drifting back, like you said, into that thought. I don't know if it's to prove God. I think it's to just the path of humans. Like, we have this thought about something, then we have to know, in order to know it's real, we have to be able to make it into some sort of tactile pattern that we can either touch or interact with in some way. But that reality still feeds back into this thought, this idea. Like, for truth on planet Zolo with this one clock, that may be true that it's running on time, but now you bring in another clock and you drop it on the planet to balance it in the water, and it has a different time. Now you've upended truth, right? Like, in that sense. But the truth of the clocks themselves are still true within their own system. So I think you need both. You need a thought to create the machine, and then you need the machine to build upon the thought. And you just keep going around in the system, in the universe.
The snake that eats its own tail.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up the first principle. Do you guys have anything else that you wanted to add about the mental universe? I want to do a little disclaimer. The first 3 or 4 are going to be pretty hefty, but then the last 3 are going to be pretty light because they're quite self-explanatory, and we know these principles already. So
I would say though that we do, like, with even without Hermeticism, we do float off the ground a little bit, right? Like, no two particles are ever actually touching.
Oh, yeah, that is true. Yeah, there's more space. There's only 5% matter in the universe. So.
We're all floating somewhere. We all float down here.
That's great. There you go.
That's so weird to think about. The universe is 5% matter.
Yeah, it's very strange. It just tells you how big the universe is.
Right. It's quite a nice place, though.
Yeah, it's.
I haven't visited anywhere else.
No complaints.
I just, when you think about like when you fathom the unfathomable, I was just thinking about like universe, right? And so 95% of space, that's what you get. But how can you do the percentage of something that is in theory infinite? I and
Yeah,
I don't know, like I just get
we're playing with funny money here. You know, like we're just a lot of it's just math based, and then we interpret the math into words, and we act like that makes more sense than the math does. I mean,
Yeah,
and
I
then,
we
think
you
the
know,
can't.
math makes more sense.
right. And then there's always the argument, well, once you quantify the universe, well, what's the universe floating in? You know, like
Mhm.
it's just yeah, I don't know. The concept of infinity, I
It's
don't get
fun.
it.
It's
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 pretty
good.
fun.
fascinating.
It's fun.
If you ever just see me like staring off into the distance, I'm like,
Hello,
infinity.
Oh,
darkness, friend.
how do you think I felt like at university when I'm starting to think about the different sizes of infinity and like the
Like
consequences of
absurd.
machine
Oh
uh,
man.
linguistics and things like that? It's like, oh dear.
We
Oh
got
dear.
ourselves in trouble.
Yeah.
No, I know. Well, that's like what would happen when I'd be reading like in the stacks and I'd be trying to wrap my head around some philosophical text. And they all have footnotes and they all have appendices. So every now and then I would read the footnote. And then the footnote is like really long. And then it has these terms that I didn't know. So then I'll go to the dictionary and I'll look up those terms. And then those terms reference these writers that I didn't know. So then I go look up the writers and it's just kind of like it just breaks my brain that when you go, because the footnotes are really specific. It's always like an essay that was, really big one summer at a college in some country. And so it's in the grander scheme, it's really obscure. So you could deep dive that all day, every day for your entire life. And it just boggles me how much we don't know and how much information is out there and how many people have thought about the same things we're thinking about now. Just,
Mm,
There,
just think about
there's
that stuff.
the
years.
there's
Hmm.
the solace of the obscure scholar, which is whatever the obscure scholar has discovered, somebody else will rediscover it. So even
Yeah.
if like they don't get credit, even if they don't get remade, like if they end up on like the basement of the library, like 5 floors down, in like that part of the library no one goes to except for shady people, uh, you can make damn
Thanks for
sure
calling
that
me out.
someone. Hey, I had a corner. I had a tent of chairs and tarts, and it was great. I'd play Hearthstone,
Oh
whatever.
man. Well, and there's some
Uh,
libraries that are subterranean. If you get that right window, you can see half dirt, half sky, and you're like, yeah.
it's pretty cool. But yeah, no, like someone else is going to come along and discover whatever the hell you discovered. So that's the solace of it, that humanity will always keep going in some direction, at least.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well,
It's
and
a
it's
never-ending
funny.
quest.
It
Yeah.
is. And I thought it was interesting. I was reading a quote by Elon Musk the other day, or it was like a TED talk, or I don't know. But he was just saying how there's like two futures that we can envision for humanity because eventually, like, the sun is going to destroy Earth, right? Like, Earth's going to get too close, or a solar flare, or something. So the consensus from scientists is that, like, eventually, even thousands of years, Earth will die.
500 million years from now, yeah.
Did I say thousands? Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Millions of years from
Same
now,
thing.
which
Don't worry. We're going to be dead anyways.
yeah, exactly. But it was interesting because he said that, like, for him, space exploration is like an insurance plan for humanity. And that to him, it feels like such a good thing to work towards because you know that millions of years down the road, you're setting in motion the tools to let humanity survive beyond our our home. And
Mm.
like I was thinking about that, like in millions of years, imagine Earth doesn't exist and humans are just scattered amongst the stars. Like,
Well, I think the race we're going to get into is the how to escape this universe race.
How to
Millions and millions
escape
of
the
years.
solar system? I mean, geez. I mean, like, Elon Musk is going to buy us another couple 100,000 years, or maybe a couple 100 million years by going to Mars. But unless we get the quandary of light speed, under wraps, we're never leaving the solar system.
I mean, we can always do like a, big mothership. Like there's different ways we can figure things out millions of years. I don't think we necessarily need to go light speed. I don't think there's like any issue in being really slow as far as traveling. It
Just
means
float
that-
along.
Well,
Yeah, it
yeah, I
just
mean, if
means
you're
that
willing
you're
to
gonna
spend
have
10,000 years on a ship, sure.
yeah,
that's why
you're
they're
gonna have
growing
to spend
meat,
multiple
isn't it?
generations.
Yeah. What?
Well, I mean, think about it. If you can grow meat in a lab and we're just, inching closer and closer towards that reality, then yeah, you could be on a spaceship where everybody's on like a paleo diet of meat
Can you
slabs.
imagine, though, like your entire life is on a ship, a
But
spaceship?
you would have no reference for anything else. Like that would
Yeah,
be
it's
your
true.
Earth.
That
Like
is very true.
we live our whole life on this spaceship.
Just don't give it any windows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
that
I
would be
know. And
pretty
I
cool.
hate the idea that Earth is a spaceship, FYI, that we're just hurling through space. I mean, it is like, it's cute, but it's also weird to think of it
All right.
like
Well,
that.
I gotta
lot.
pick this up a little bit, you guys, because if we keep at this pace, we're gonna be done in 7 hours. So
Let's do it. 7 hours. 7 hour podcast about the whole
Yes.
night.
Oh, I'm
straight
tired. I'm
on
too
through.
tired, man. All right.
Okay, so we're going to get into number 2. And as I said, the first few are going to be a little bit more dense than the others, only because the others are very self-explanatory. So the second principle is the principle of correspondence. Now, many of you probably have heard about this through the famous witchy saying, as above, so below, and as below, so above. But the principle of correspondence expresses the idea that there is always a correspondence between the laws of phenomenon of various planes of being and life. As above, so below, as below, so above. This principle states that there is a harmony which can be made, agreement and correspondence between these planes delineated as the great physical plane, the great mental plane, and the great spiritual plane. Now, before I get into the article here, have you heard of this notion? As above, so below?
From the craft.
Yeah, that's why I said witchy.
I got it. It's also a big thing in pre-contact Mesoamerican Indian religions. The Axis Mundi, the tree of life that grows from, the bottom to the top, that is your as below or as above, so below, and it's the duality rotating through. So you have like the truth, the roots in the middle, and they grow out on both sides, pretty much.
Right.
At least in my mind. The actual
Well,
imagery may be different, but
And that
that's
makes okay.
that's why I ran into it.
Well, that makes sense too, because like from a Navajo perspective, there's a prayer that ends with like Hujon Nasklin, which is kind of talking about directional protection. And so you would say it 4 times to say that beauty is before me and behind me, above me and below me. So, and by beauty they mean like protection and your ancestors and things like
High
that.
magic, high light type things,
Mhm.
nice things. Yeah.
Like woo.
Woo woo. Yeah. Well,
I love that term.
we've all been kind of initiated to this concept, but I can, off of the top of my head, think about one that is the most visual, at least, and that's the concept of protons and electrons circling the nucleus of a molecule, and how that is a direct facsimile for solar systems and how planets circle around stars. That would be that type of concept of everything on the micro level is a representation of the mechanics that go on in the macro level. Now, there are certain mechanics like gravity, I believe, and certain little things that we still haven't really figured out. And especially when you get into the quantum, things start getting weird and they don't necessarily obey the same laws as the macro physics does. But there's definitely representation there. And this is one of the ones that I wanted to bring up to you guys, because it kind of it circles back into our here's my one per episode, our CIA files that talk about the ability to tap into the energetic grid of the universe through your mind. And this is from Psychology Today. And it's the title says, "As above, so below, a sky brain coincidence." An electromagnetic parallel exists between our brains and our atmosphere. This goes on to say our brain waves are electromagnetic currents generated by our brains, can be measured by electroencephalographic EEGs. There we go. These currents range across a spectrum of about 4 hertz to 60 hertz. Hertz refers to the number of cycles per second. A cycle in 1 second would be about 1 hertz. 100 cycles in a second is 100 hertz. So the image below is from the human EEG recordings, and that's these lines here. And the upper line is an EEG. So this here is an EEG. And then the lower line is a 10 hertz timing signal. And so the upper line, the more frequent waves, the higher the hertz. That's just a representation. See, the spikes are a little bit more dramatic in the higher frequencies. And then it goes on to talk about the spectrum of the Schumann resonance and the ionosphere. And so the ionosphere begins about 40 miles above the Earth's surface and contains ions, which are negatively and positively charged particles created by solar winds. Between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere is an electromagnetic cavity that can hold electromagnetic currents. The lightning that frequently occurs in this cavity generates electromagnetic currents. These currents bounce between the edge of the ionosphere and the Earth's surface. The currents range across a spectrum of about 4 hertz to 60 hertz. These waves are called the Schumann resonance. And it goes on to just talk about how there is a correlation between the ability for the human brain to vibrate on these 4 to 60 hertz frequencies and the Earth vibrating on the same frequency level as well. And that seems to be some sort of coincidence, as this author likes to say, about this very famous as above, so below. The concept being that this little magnetic sort of field that your brain creates and your mind creates is the same sort of field that the Earth itself creates. Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
There are these interesting implants that you can get that reconnect you to the magnetic frequency of the Earth. Ooh. So yeah, people say that once they get them, that they have a new sense, like it's something that we lost during modernity and being safe and not having to navigate just by intuition, I guess. And we talked in your CIA series about hemisyncs and brain syncs. So if you hemisync with the hemisphere, then all sorts of fun, I think, Earth things can happen, and can be that Hermes-like connection, that messenger. Whereas through your science and through your writing or whatever, you have the message conveyed, the final product of it. So yeah, it makes sense to me. Like, I can see that.
Yeah, I think it's quite fascinating, the connections, especially with the Schumann resonance. I know that you can actually download, or you can look on YouTube. They have hour-long videos of just a video playing the Schumann resonance. And it's actually quite relaxing to listen to. It's great for meditation. So if you ever want to astral project or tap into the universe's secrets, make sure you put on some of those frequencies, and you might get there faster.
Well, it's weird. The minute you guys started talking about frequencies, my little lamp started flickering. Spooky. Halloween month.
Do you think that feeling you get, like, when you're out in the woods and you feel great, do you think it's just locking into that frequency?
I think so. I think it's like saturating yourself in that frequency so that you start to vibrate sympathetically to it, for sure.
Let's see that.
Yeah, and I think yeah. All that what you said.
Yeah.
Well, I can't really add much to it. I was like trying, but I'm like, well, we got to move.
Oh no, it's cool. And so just the next little example I wanted to show you guys. This is from my buddy Paul Stamets here. This is basically a mycologist, which is a scientist of mushrooms, which is kind of a fascinating topic. But this one is talking about, this article talks about how the mycological root system directly resembles and kind of mimics the brain neural layout. So it talks about how the roots of fungi, connect with each other in the same sort of manner that neurons in the brain connect, and they actually send information in the same way that neurons in the brain do. Which I just find fascinating. They don't really get into too much about it because it's not a very long one, but they get into some of the photos, and I can bring them up here. So this is the one you were talking about, Ayla, this concept, or this photo of the universe that kind of looks like a neural network. This is the universe expanding into a network of galaxies. So this was one of the original sort of like representations of that. And then we have an actual nerve cell taken under an electron microscope, I would wager. Then we have mushroom mycelium, which is the same sort of, this is the root system of mushrooms. And then this is just a shot of London at nighttime. And then this is a graphical representation of the internet, which is kind of interesting. Oh, the pixels. Oh, the pixels. Never mind.
Zoom in enhance.
Yeah.
Zoom in enhance.
You said, "Oh, the pixels."
Oh, the pixels. There's not enough of you.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
But
So
going back to the Gateway Project, right? When you zoom in, and the whole concept of pixelation and such being like a precursor for the simulation theory, I thought that was kind of an interesting tangent.
Yeah, that was what's his name? Itzhak Bentov postulated that the farther you get down into the quanta, basically the lowest level of the quanta is a pixel, and so that's like the smallest observable thing is a pixel, and everything that is basically created is made of pixels, which is a highly contestable subject, but very fun to think about nonetheless. So as far as this concept of things that have this sort of similar structure, now, do you think that this is just a coincidence, merely just a mathematical convenience of matter forming, or do you think that this is something deeper than that? I guess I should ask, is it just convenient for matter to form in this manner, or is there something deeper to it?
That's a good question. I think. Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
Good. I think it's like a consequence of natural systems. Like not a coincidence, but it's the most probable outcome in every case. So like with the pineal gland and all of these different images, we see how the brain likes to make mental self-representations. So it makes sense that most matter in the universe would kind of self-recur in this way, whether it be from just like a neuron to, density population in London or whatever, how spread out their distribution, or the ideas the idea mappings of the internet. It does make sense that there's a self-referencing thing within matter,
and that just makes me think that we're just like the universe is just itself looking at itself through an infinite lens,
just a kid with two mirrors
pointed
at each other.
Pretty much. Just like waving its arm like, woo. Yeah.
Now you're just making me think of our dog whenever she passes the oven, because sometimes she'll catch a glimpse of herself and she'll like look at it real seriously, and it's just silly.
What are you? What are you?
What is
world?
that?
Mirror world.
It's just so cute though, her little face. You can tell she's thinking, because she's a smart dog. She's an Australian Shepherd, and she just stares really seriously. But the other thing these pictures make me think of is like, well, first, a lot of these, there's electrical impulses happening, and I think it's interesting. Like when you think of electricity, it has that same chaotic, distorted, like gravitate where there is the fuel or the
initiation.
Well, yeah, and then it seeks out, like you can actually see it seeking that point where it can disperse. And yeah, and you know, I mean, like electricity, I don't know. I still wonder about that. Like that is a weird thing to me. It's weird to me that the planet has hertz. It's weird to me that electricity exists. It's weird to me that thunder exists because of electricity. Like there's just certain things that I've said this before. We have explanations for, but I still wonder. Like,
Yeah.
is that the best way to
Right.
describe what's going on? And what's the reason for that? Bless you, pups. So
There's
yeah.
there's new, well, not really new, but there's unified field theory, which, you know, everybody's scrambling right now to kind of come up with. But there's one that states that everything is an electromagnetic spectrum, and that we're actually in an electromagnetic universe over anything else,
Makes sense.
which I find kind of interesting. I wouldn't deign to know the mechanics and the math involved, but the elevator
All
pitch
Dane.
sounds pretty good to me.
All
I
Dane.
do. What if like we're just some third graders failed science project? Like, it's not even that good.
Oh my God,
Yeah,
we're
right.
100%. I swear to God, guys, I'm telling you right now, like we just don't know anything. We
Yeah,
don't.
you can see like this picture of the universe that looks kind of like an amoeba growing. Maybe we're just in a petri dish of
And
God, you know.
Or like,
they're just sort of laughing. They're like, "Oh my god, I got something to grow over here! Look at this
Yeah,
thing."
yeah, right.
well, it's always funny too, because when you think about when people, God, you can't even say that anymore. But the first time people thought that the world was flat, and then you find out that it's round,
The first
it's
time.
like, you know, but like that leap of information and accessibility, you know, it's just kind of interesting because I'm like, at what
It's so
point
funny
did
for
we
the people that thought the world is flat, like the people that currently do, they've gone full circle.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, and
Yeah,
now they've even gone so far as to say that the Earth is hollow. Like, you know,
oh no, well,
oh
Hollow
my
Earth
God,
has been around for a long time.
I
So
just
I
don't.
just
How
want to
can
meet
it be
Godzilla.
hollow? Getting off the rails now. Oh, I love
yeah.
it.
All right. Well, anything else on this? I mean, it's, you know, that's, we can definitely do an entire episode on the correlations between the macro and the micro. But I thought this was just a fine enough representation and kind of an easy enough to understand principle.
I'm down
Yeah,
with the
very cool.
macro and the micro as long as we're all eating M&Ms while we discuss that.
Okay.
But they have to
M&M,
be.
micro, macro. That was
Some
funny.
of the M&Ms have to be giant M&Ms, though. They just can't be all the same size M&Ms.
Well,
Oh,
what if
yeah,
I
that's
turn
true.
them upside down? Then they're W's.
Well, just don't turn them upside down then. Jeez, clearly.
So we just put like a
Wait,
line and put another M.
is it
So
like
it expands
Schrodinger's
across.
M&M, where it's like you don't, it's an M or a W until you take it out of the bag?
You
Sometimes
know,
it's an E.
Sometimes it's an E.
that cat philosophical problem or whatever, I can't hold on to it. It's like I read about it and I'm like, oh, okay, cool, and then somebody references it and I'm like, I have no idea what that is. Like it just
Mm,
keeps losing out of my head. So
mm.
but
Anyways, so we're good to jump on to number 3.
number 3.
All right,
Yep.
let's do number 3. Number 3 is the principle of vibration. And this states that nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. And this expounds on the idea. Excuse you. I'm going to take over.
That's why I put my
Didn't
mic on
matter.
mute.
I know. Come on. I'm on a roll here.
Okay, sorry, you can't say the word without thinking about it. Okay, go ahead.
All right, anyways. This expounds on the idea that motion is manifest in everything in the universe, that nothing rests and everything moves, vibrates, and circles. This principle explains that the distinction between manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit are the result of only different vibrations. The higher a person is on the scale, the higher the rate of vibration will be. Here, the all is said to be at an infinite level of vibration, almost to the point of being at rest. There are said to be millions upon millions of varying degrees between the highest level, the all, and the objects of the lowest vibration. Mental transmutation is described as the practice of application of this principle. To change one's mental state is to change vibration. One may do this by an effort of will, by means of deliberately fixing the attention upon a more desirable state. Let's see. What? Oh, okay. So that's the end of that little explanation. I thought my paragraphs ran together for a minute, but I thought that's kind of interesting. Well, not. I mean, it's very much the sort of new age concept of everything being vibration and rising to higher levels. And it kind of points to the concepts of string theory, and that particles are all vibrating at a certain frequency, and that's what creates matter. So yeah, I wanted to bring up that. I thought that was pretty interesting. It says string theory is not necessarily an exact explanation or representation of it, but it is kind of similar in certain ways. So it's like the starting point of string theory is the idea that point-like particles of particle physics can also be modeled as one-dimensional objects called strings. I do not talk this much on an average, guys, so you have to stay with me. My brain is starting to have, like, my mind is having a stroke and starting to. Okay.
Doing great. You're doing great.
Thanks so much.
10 out of 10.
Yeah. String theory describes how strings propagate through space and interact with each other. In a given version of string theory, there is only one kind of string, which may look like a small loop or segment or ordinary string, and it can vibrate in different ways. On distant scales, scales larger than the string scale, a string will look just like an ordinary particle with its mass, charge, and other properties determined by the vibrational state of the string. In this way, all of the different elementary particles may be viewed as vibrating strings. In string theory, one of the vibrational states of the string gives rise to the graviton, a quantum mechanical particle that carries gravitational force. Thus, string theory is a theory of quantum gravity. I don't really know a whole lot on string theory, but it definitely sounds good. It also kind of makes me think of the concepts of cymatics. And are you guys aware of cymatics?
No.
Every day.
Every day?
Every day I'm talking about cymatics.
Oh, well,
in fact, I taught you about cymatics.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Tell me what you learned.
Well, cymatics is actually the manipulation of matter with sound, and it kind of displays the concept of vibration in this third principle. Are we on the third or the fourth? The third principle of vibration. And here we have a article about cymatics. It's the connection. There's a connection between sound vibrations and physical reality. Yes, it's called cymatics. Cymatics is a study of wave phenomenon. Is the science of pioneered by Swiss medical doctor and natural scientist Hans Jenny. It is derived from the Greek chyma, which means wave, and ta, chymatic, meaning matters pertaining to waves. Basically, it's the concept that high vibrational frequencies can form matter in patterns that are exceedingly more intricate the higher frequencies you go. It's interestingly enough, a lot of people think that the large monoliths that have been created by the ancients were created with some sort of cymatic technology, which they were able to utilize acoustics and frequency in order to lift objects. Now here you'll see is a representation of sand on a sound plate. And these are all at different varying frequencies. So what they do is they put a pile of sand on top of a metal plate and then shoot a frequency through the metal plate. And these are the types of results that you get. You'll get, this is probably a lower frequency, and these get more. The more complex, the higher the frequency is. And so this is an actual science that is done. You guys can check it out on YouTube. It's really fascinating. And it's just this concept that sound can manipulate matter. And so this vibration that sound creates can manipulate matter and actually change matter into more complicated frameworks. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I thought that that was incredibly interesting. And these videos are quite entertaining to watch if you watch them on YouTube. It's really cool stuff.
Yeah, like it makes sense. I mean, we have like resonance frequencies, right? Where you could break glass if you hit it with a certain frequency. Who was it? Fitzgerald. I forgot which singer it was that, like, she had the video of her singing it, like, breaks the wine glass. And then, dude, this, from like a personal standpoint, like when you go work out or when I work out, I need music and I need something to like give me that pump,
Yes.
that get me higher, get me just acting more, moving more, doing more, and even true just in craft, like you see a craftsman with listening to music, there's quite a beautiful thing happening when they're flowing through it. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense that the vibration of music, this rhythm, or maybe just this curated rhythm we call music, because music exists everywhere in nature regardless, can create different physical states in the breaking of a glass, or different mental states that lead to different physical states, like when working out.
Definitely. Yeah, I love that kind of popping in some good tunes and working out is definitely the best. Yeah,
going
I think
crazy.
that's a lot of fun. Yeah, exactly.
Listen to some metal and start throwing weights around the gym. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, it's funny too how like genres of music can encapsulate like attitude. So for example, I had a rough work day and I was trying to focus and, get my work done and then feel my feelings about personal stuff. And I just like could not focus. And like more work was piling on. I was like, oh my God. And I was like, that's it. I need my Slipknot or like I had to put some like hardcore like death metal music on, which I never listen to. I'm usually more of like, that gentle rock kind of Crystal Singing Bowl or like folksy music. But if I have to crank something out, I have to go like full like screamo. And I can make it happen.
I think the military did an experiment in like Desert Storm with like tank crews listening to heavy metal or something like that. But I may be just pulling that out of nowhere. But I feel like that's been a thing that's been tested before.
Well, and it's funny because like even when it's like ragey and screamy, there's still a melody that you can glean out of it. And it's almost as if like if your internal world is chaotic, then having like some sort of chaotic external music like puts you back into a calm state. It's really weird.
It's like the Rick and Morty wave thing. It's like, you see, these are my genius waves, Morty, and these are your waves that cancel out my genius waves. Yeah, it's like a way to vent that out. It's a way to like vent out that.
It's an expression.
Like
a low pass filter.
And I like that, we have what is it?
No, keep going. Sorry, I'm just murmuring.
I was just gonna say we have sound baths now too. So I think like a lot of people are starting to pick up that if you surround yourself with like crystal singing bowl sounds and various different like chimes and resonance and chants and things like that, it can definitely put your own body in that harmonic vibration. And I mean, I love a good sound bath. I feel super relaxed afterwards. And I think it's interesting too, you're talking about sound manipulating matter, but I believe that you can do some crazy stuff now. Like if a person dies, you can take their ashes and turn them into like a vinyl. Isn't that a thing? So that's where like a physical thing becomes music, and every person's ashes will sound different or something.
No, I think you can just print a song. I don't think it's just because you'd have to print something on the vinyl. A blank vinyl won't play anything.
So maybe I'm thinking of a different experiment. It's something about how
you into a vinyl. It's just that you have to actually etch a song onto the vinyl.
Yeah. Wait, what song? Cool. What song do you think would your ashes be?
I know, right? Which song do you choose?
Death metal. I miss Mom.
Mine is just being rickrolled, like X Mom. Just freaking out.
But to pick up on this sort of the principle of vibration, I mean, we even think about the concept of just physical matter that we have in our day-to-day lives. Like, I'm doing this on a table right now. Well, this table actually isn't solid. It's a tight collection of vibrating molecules that just basically hold together enough for it to be called a table, and that's basically everything that is in existence is just this bundle of molecules that decided that, okay, we're going to stick together. And it seems to be that the way in order to get molecules to actually form something is to trap them in some sort of vibrational matrix. And so that makes me question, if that's the case, then how sensitive are we to these types of things as well? Like, we know that there are technologies out there. Maybe some of you guys don't know, but there are technologies out there called ELFs, which are extreme low frequencies, which can be played and instill a sense of dread and fear into a human being without them actually hearing anything. So it makes me wonder just how susceptible we are to vibration and frequency that we may not even be picking up.
Do you
You're
think
talking
that's
about 5G.
No,
I could honestly guess what I was gonna say.
not going that deep.
Do you think it's like I think we're extremely sensitive to that stuff, but do you think like that ELF type thing is just like the new face of an MK Ultra project? Like, what do these frequencies do on unsuspecting citizens?
Yes, definitely. Well, and I think we know what they do. I think we've already used them a lot. Like, they just had this thing, apparently, not to get into the politics of our modern day because we're in a little bubble here on Exofathom, but apparently there was speculation that in order to quell some of the unrest, a police department in America asked to use basically a microwave gun that would make you feel like you're burning on the inside.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which is technology we do have, and that's just a radio frequency that is tuned to give your body the sensation of burning.
Yep.
Which is
the fact that
crazy.
The fact that we have people today who are still like, what's the best way I can harm a large group of people? You know what I mean? And that those people are funded by our tax dollars. It's just like,
Well, I don't know about the long-term effects, but apparently, it's a more humane way of population disbursement. But who knows? It doesn't seem to me that bombarding somebody with radio frequencies is going to be any good for them. But
oh my God, no.
Why do you want to feel like you're burning? Like, of all the humane, like, you might as well just throw white phosphorus at them, just call it a day.
Yeah. Or, I don't know, release a bunch of mosquitoes. People do not want to have mosquitoes hanging around them. Like, just boom, done. Well, maybe not mosquitoes, but I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like the response, Ayla.
Huh?
You'd make a terrible dictator.
Release the mosquitoes. It's too terrible. But they have actually genetically modified mosquitoes now that they're using to get rid of bugs in Florida. So
yep. And we thought that was a good idea. Like, it's definitely not going to cause any ecological problems in the future. That's for sure.
Everything's going to be GMO soon. It's weird.
What about drones with super soakers for population?
Sounds like a party.
that kind of conjures images of the 60s, and you don't want drones with fire hoses and stuff. Like, that's a bad look.
They did it at Standing Rock.
So it's like,
well,
drones with
that wasn't a good look either.
Yeah, well,
I think
nobody cares.
Any population dispersal all looks bad, I guess.
It is. No, well, I don't. Yeah, I mean,
it depends. Look, let's not. As I said, I didn't really want to get into the weeds about political responses in the current year, but
okay.
Anything that's less than lethal is probably good.
No.
At least some respect.
I got it. All you have to do is set up a station in the direction you want people to move. And you put a whole bunch of In-N-Out burgers and fries, and you get a conversation going, and you just have a cookout. And I
Yeah,
think
I don't
that's
think that they're
the
doing
answer.
this on field trips. I don't think the police are trying to, like burn a bus full of school kids. I think
You
One step-
underestimate the power of a barbecue, my friend.
hold on, one
This is
step
good food.
down. Still vibration, still population dispersal, but you just get like mega speakers and play "We Built the City on Rock and Roll"
There
on
you go.
repeat, and then nobody
Oh,
feels like they're
no.
burning. Everybody's
We
ears
didn't
hurt.
start the fire.
Yeah, you see.
Yeah, see, they just need to get more creative. It doesn't need to go violent.
All right. Well,
Back into the
let's
bubble.
get off
Back in the
that. Get
bubble.
that bad
I
taste
wanna
of
hear-
politics out of my mouth. All right.
Oh,
Well,
the world is some
Dude,
fire.
the point is that vibrations do play a big effect on individual humans and the larger populations for sure.
Definitely.
And speaking of that, right? Because like you conveyed that concept of politics via vibrations from your mouth
I did.
through this, you know what I mean? So it's like weird because
Bob.
but that's what
Throat
talking
chakra
is.
stuff.
Like you
Yeah.
can create anger in somebody by talking about things.
That's true.
Right? And it's
Yeah.
but it's sounds coming out of your mouth and you're making those, I mean, it's ideas too, but it's just weird when you start thinking about like,
And it doesn't even have to be words precisely. You know, it could be the
Yeah.
tone and the way you convey it.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
No,
Yeah.
that's very true. We're just little vibration creators
And
Weird.
receivers, like,
and receiver. Yeah.
oh yeah, the tone was kind of sharp. Does this person not like me? What did I do? Why am I such an awful person? And then
Why do they have that
Meanwhile-
inflection on that sentence? Yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're just trying to suppress a burp or something, and you're
You're
like,
right. Yeah.
Yep.
Or their voice cracks.
mhm.
All right, so let's jump to number 4, which is the principle of polarity, which I think this is probably going to get a little bit easier from here. The next few are going to be probably pretty quick, but the principle of polarity is that everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has pairs of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. Now, I'm not necessarily sure about all of the last two sentences, all truths being half-truths and all paradox being reconciled, but the principle of polarity embodies the idea that everything is dual, and that it has two aspects or two poles. Everything is and isn't at the same time. And there are two sides of everything, and opposites are identical in nature, but yet differ in degree. So we probably don't need to spend a whole lot of time explaining that because most of us have an understanding of what that kind of means. So I wanted to give a few good examples of duality in our world so that people could, conceptualize it easier. But there are general examples such as masculine and feminine, mother, father, passivity and activity, light and dark, body, mind, intuition and logic, night and day, soft and hard, internal and external, follower, leader, receptive, creative, nature, technology. There's examples from your psyche, which you have the shadow and then the ego, and the shadow persona. And they have the unconscious mind and the conscious mind. You also have the examples in the natural world where obviously our planet has two poles, the north and the south pole. There's a positive and negative charge. And then the waves of motion of light being a particle or a wave, and the seasons of winter and summer or spring and fall. There's that kind of juxtaposition basically in everything that we look at, which kind of makes me wonder is there anything that has something that isn't attached to it on the other side of the coin? Can you recall anything that doesn't have an opposite?
The yin yang as a whole.
As a whole? Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's what they mean in this thing, I think, that where they say that opposites are identical in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that, if you were to take the yin and you take the yang and they're separate things, yes, but the yin yang, it is its own thing and they're each one half. So
Well, I think it's interesting too because there's a weird concept at play here, right? So it's like what would seem to be one whole thing is but a half of something in which then turns into a whole again. So it's kind of like we're playing with like dimensions, like dimensional understanding, or like, it turns into, it's a point and then it's a point, or then it's a line between 2 points and then it's a point again,
well, yeah, and I think it's just an example too of like language, because we need to categorize things in order to describe them. But the minute you categorize something, it can be broken down into more categories, or it can be lumped into another category. And I think that's just the problem with words. Anytime you create a word, you have to create all of the parts around it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you define something, you're also undefining something or something along those lines. I don't know.
Yeah. Or
Well,
even think about colors. You have green, you have olive green, you have dark green, light green, you have pale green, neon green. I mean, like, and then even if you have 36 greens, you could still say, well, but that green over there, paisley green, that's paisley green. Like you can keep just, and you're never going to be able to define them all, because eventually you're going to find that no two greens are really alike. Then you're going to say, they're all green.
Wait till you get to the point where no two people see the same color.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Some have the narrow link and they can see that butterfly color.
The butterfly color. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Butterflies can see ultraviolet light.
I gotcha. That's cool. I don't. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think everything kind of always has its opposites. Like there's the notion of like the soul being like originally humans had 4 legs and 4 arms and had everything built into them, but it was too powerful for the gods, I think. So they split people up into 2, and like now you have your opposite and your soulmate, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there's anything that doesn't at least use some sort of opposite or have some sort of opposite that I can think of.
And before we jump on to the next one, as I said, this is kind of like a pretty self-explanatory concept, but do you guys have any favorite examples of duality? Anything that pops into your mind that you're like, that's really something that speaks to me?
Love and hate.
That's a good one.
They drive humans to the same irrational actions or the same weight of feeling. And I think they're pretty much the same thing. I think when you hate something, you love something. And when you love something, you hate something. You hate the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if you hate it so much, there's a part of you that loves to hate it.
Well, why does that thing move you so much in such a irrational, emotional way? Just like love does, it moves you in a irrational, emotional way that leads you to do extremely stupid things.
And
It's the same thing with hate.
Yeah, and just like the words, right? Love and hate, they're their own things, but you just describe them in a group of a category where they're both a situation where you're passionate about something. So you categorize them both in the same thing. Then you take passion, and then you got dispassion. Then you can group those into groups of interest. Like it just doesn't stop.
1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 1, then becomes 2, then becomes 1, then you have 3, and then that becomes 1, and then that becomes 2.
Yeah. And I think,
that sort of manifestation of dimensional expression.
Hierarchy, expression. Yeah. It's just never ending. It's interesting for sure, but it doesn't end. And I think if I were to pick a favorite duality, I think it would be high and low. Because, we're in the pandemic, and I'm trying to always bring in like a little like mental health nugget every time we talk. So I would say that like if you're feeling kind of low, you can think to yourself, wow, I'm kind of like vibrating at this lower energy. And then you think, how can I elevate the vibe? How can I elevate that energy and raise it and make it higher? And so like for me on Sunday, I just like burned incense. I like played a bunch of music, opened all the windows, and like just tried to create a higher vibrational field in the home. And I felt a lot better afterwards. So it's just kind of interesting. I like to toy with the concepts of high and low states to help me kind of navigate my day. Does that make sense? Is that weird?
No, it's pretty cool. I think I do that in some sense too.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So it's
Not
relatable.
weird. Thanks. Thanks.
Well, I'm pretty weird to be fair, so I don't know if you want to be in the same
It's a good match.
ship of Theseus as me. I don't know if you want to hop in there.
God damn it.
Anything else you guys want to say about the principle of polarity? I think, as I said, it's pretty self-explanatory. A lot of these principles could be their own episode, but I thought it would be good. I didn't really want to break them off from each other. I think it's good to have as
Yes, I have one more thought.
Okay, go for it.
Magnets.
Yeah,
Remember in the 90s how crazy everybody was about magnets? It was like you couldn't turn around without hearing something about magnets. But I think that's interesting that, like the Earth has magnetic poles. And then, when you think about the way magnets work, I don't know. I mean, I don't really, is there that much to say about magnets? I feel like there was a lot of hype, but then like
repulsion and
yeah, but like let's say you're going to go to a museum about magnets, like they only really do the one thing, right?
Okay, well, where in your imaginary world was everybody going gaga about magnets in the 90s?
You know what? It's because I think there's a Simpsons episode where they made a commentary about how crazy people were with
1993 call
magnets.
Ayla. They want their references back. All right.
That was so harsh. Oh my god.
Do you remember when everybody was nuts about magnets? It was the new technology.
Okay, well, sometimes I do parody myself, so that's totally what I was going for. You just missed the nuance.
That's true.
It's true.
It goes over my head sometimes. So.
Oh, yeah, you're too young.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to number 5, which is the principle of rhythm. Everything flows in and out. Everything has tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. So the principle of rhythm expresses the idea that everything there is manifested a measured motion, a to and from, a flow and inflow, a swing backward and forward, a pendulum-like movement. There is a rhythm between every pair of opposites or poles, and it is closely related to the principle of polarity. It can be seen that this principle enables transition from one pole to the other, and not necessarily poles of extreme opposites. So that's kind of cool. So the principle of the rhythm is kind of the vehicle to getting to the poles. Or the principles of polarity. And obviously we have a lot of representation of what the principles of rhythm manifest as in our daily lives. I like the pendulum. I like the tide sort of idea. It's this concept of push and pull. Definitely push and pull is the biggest sort of rhythmic constant in our universe. So you have also the concept of cyclicalness, the seasons being cyclical, cycles of nature, life, rebirth, death, all of these things. Do you guys have any thoughts on the principle of rhythm? Is there something that stands out to you about that concept?
Well, actually, I know you studied a little bit of music theory. Can you define rhythm musically? Like, what exactly is rhythm? I have an idea in my mind, but from a musical standpoint, rhythm.
I don't know. I mean, I took one music theory class, so I don't know.
Well, you learned a lot. You talk about music theory all the time, but I mean, isn't it just like the repetition of sound in varying distances to create different patterns?
I mean, kind of. It's like the intervals, but see, the thing is that rhythm can also be the spaces in which notes are not played. Mm-hmm. So you have to it's hard to kind of pin down what the rhythm is because it can be the space in between notes. I sense that was not a satisfactory answer for you.
No, I'm just laughing because you're like, I only took one music theory class, and then you're like, it's the space between notes. I mean, like it is
only that, but it is part of that.
Yeah, but that's what I mean is I think that like the how do I? Okay, so like I didn't study music theory, but I did tap dance for a really long time, and when you're making beats with your body, I don't know. It's just
You missed an
interesting.
opportunity to say when you're making beats with your feet.
Looks pretty good.
Oh, I like that. Making beats with my feet. Oh, that's super cute. I kind of lost the point, but I mean, like, in the sense that with rhythm, it is like the backbone of so many songs. And again, we were talking about how we resonate with songs and how things like that really can motivate you when you're working out or doing something else. And for like Native Americans, we have drum beats. We don't mix up the rhythm as much. We keep it very like even,
You
like
guys
a
are
heartbeat.
floor.
Huh?
I said you guys are 4/4 to the floor all the time.
Yeah,
One,
four to the floor.
2, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a little bit different than that. I mean, but like for
No, it's
example, like
Native
Wait,
American.
you mean I can't waltz?
no, it's
You're telling me I
not.
can't do a waltz?
No, waltz
No,
is
you
a
can't.
3/4. It's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's a
Yeah,
waltz.
Mr. I only took one music theory class. You sure know a lot about rhythm now, don't you?
I was in orchestra for a long time. I didn't take music. I only took one music theory class, but I
But
did
you
play an
absorb
instrument.
anyway. Splitting
Anyway,
hairs. But about the drum thing though, that beat that you shared, that's like a movie beat. The real beats, like for example, if you were to sit in the Native American church, they have these drums that they put water in and then they stretch like wet deer hide over. And the drumming, there's no upbeat, downbeat. It's just do 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 do, and they do it really, 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 really fast. And there's something about that like one, it makes your heart rate go a little bit higher, but it also puts you in a deeply meditative state.
it's like the
To
binaural beat.
yes, that's exactly what I was trying to lead into. Is that when you start digging more into rhythm, you get back to that hemisync stuff. It all comes
Yeah,
back to that.
all coming back to it.
We're
Well, they
building it
also,
up, guys. We need more
yeah,
views on that series, and then we're going to
yeah.
put that gateway
We'll
number
finish it.
10 up. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, arguably the first instrument humans created was a percussive instrument. So it would make sense that we mimic the rhythms. We have a rhythm machine in our bodies. It's called our heart. Constant beating of our heart. We probably emulated that with percussive instruments at the very beginning. Maybe
And I heard,
emulated other animals or nature, phenomena.
yeah, and I heard that the tides are just the heartbeat of the sea.
Yeah, or the
Aw.
moon,
I know, right? I smiled when I said that.
the heartbeat of the moon, more like it, but okay.
The what?
It's the heartbeat of the moon, more likely.
It's not even touching the moon.
The
Hello,
moon
come on
is
out.
what creates the tides, though.
Yeah, but it's external. That's like saying my heart's in the truck over there and it's beating and it's making my heart beat. And, well, I don't know. I guess that's what I just said about the drums. So maybe you have a point. I don't know.
Anyways.
I'm
I
so
think-
wise. I know nothing.
I think too. There's a rhythm in life, and there's a way you can dance to that rhythm, and it changes.
Aw,
Sometimes you have to, fucking mosh pit to life, and other
True.
times it's a slow dance, and you have to
Right.
be very precise with your steps.
Mhm.
But it helps to learn that, because if you get caught in one extreme or the other, if you don't know how to move from one pole to the other using these rhythms in a way,
Mhm.
you kind of get stuck in a mode, and it's not a good mode. You just get stuck in that one rhythm, so to say.
That's
mode's
true.
a weird word too. Mode, like
Mode.
mode.
Is it just one of those words you say a lot until it just means nothing?
No, because
I
I
said
would think
that-
of brownie a la mode, but
I did
from
that
like
with poop the other day.
with what?
With poop? Think
Yeah.
about it. Just think about that word. It's a very bizarre word.
Yeah.
Stupid.
I don't know. I fixated on it for
While you were
a couple
pooping?
minutes the other day. No, not even. It popped up in my head, and I'm like, "Poop's a weird word."
No, I know. There's some words that just like weird, but no. I mean, what I love bathroom humor. I will laugh at anything. relating to the bathroom, but also too, yeah, poop. Where did that come from?
It's very strange.
And then, when you say you're like pooped out, like, what does that mean?
What did you poop out? I don't know.
Have you
Well,
been
and
sticking to that diet, or are you
Oh
Yeah.
my
making
God.
everything proper?
Well, no, my dog, we went to the dog park and she had a really great time. She usually poops before we go in, like she's super excited. And then on the way out, she was walking really slow and I was like, "Oh, are you all pooped out?" And like she squatted and pooped right as I said
Mhm.
that. And I was like, "Oh, it's okay, I guess that's my answer."
Yep.
But,
All right.
no, but mode I think is weird because like, isn't that like a math term? Mode? Like,
Mode. Yeah, it can be used in math. I don't know if its original origin comes from math.
I don't know. The word etymology is the study of words, and yeah, if you start just like look up words sometimes. Their history can be really cool.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, no, I gotcha. Because mathematicians are philosophers too, so they make their own definitions of the words they use.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool. Do you guys have anything else on the principle of rhythm?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Sounds good. We're going to move on to the sixth principle, which is the principle of cause and effect.
Space.
Excuse me?
Oh, I just said 6 in Spanish. 6.
Oh, okay. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. And there are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. It explains that there's cause for every effect, and then every effect has a cause, obviously. Just so that it also states that there's no such thing as chance, and that chance is merely a term indicating extant causes not recognized or perceived. I thought that was a pretty good line, that chance is only something that hasn't really been defined and understood. And obviously, the concept of cause and effect is something that we are all pretty familiar with. If you're not, you can think about the ideas of karma. You can even think about Newton's third law, which is a push or force is a push or pull that acts upon an object that results of its own interactions with another object. Force results from interaction. Some forces result from contact interactions. Other forces are the result of action at a distance interactions. And according to Newton, whenever objects A and B interact with each other, they exert forces upon each other. So that's kind of the same kind of principle. So makes me wonder, because this feels like a very hard baked into the laws of the universe type of law. Like, this one doesn't seem like it's as nebulous or abstract as the other ones. This one obviously seems very much more empirical, much more solid. And I think there's something that speaks to our human need to see cause and effect, because I think there's something inside of us that likes to see the representation of cause and effect interact in our daily world. That's why we like seeing karma get played out, when somebody does something really mean to you, or say somebody's speeding on the freeway and cuts you off and then a cop pulls them over. Or, movies about revenge like Kill Bill, like there's something about the catharsis that we get from witnessing cause and effect that I think is very intriguing. And I'm not exactly sure what the reason is that we search for it so much, or that it's so satisfying to us when we actually witness it. Do you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you get down to it, okay, I can't cast too wide of a net because I don't want to offend anyone, but like religion is faith, right? So faith is belief in something. And usually tied in with that is some sort of eternal justice. So, someone might wrong you in this world. It's not your job to judge or get revenge on them, because you have faith in a higher power taking care of that. So that can be karma, that can be hell. That can be reincarnation as a bug. You know, there's ways that we make sense of it. But in the absence of faith, or when faith is questioned, or if you don't have faith that there is this external eternal justice, then you want to see that justice enacted here.
Mhm.
And you know, that can be man created laws, that can also be revenge. And I think like Kill Bill, it's a very good movie. I like it a lot. I watched it, one of my favorite movies when I was younger. But yeah, I mean, personally, I wouldn't be able to enact revenge. But I do think that it's interesting that we have this need for order, whether or not it's going to be some sort of eternal order, or if it's going to be something that we can see in our lifetime.
Mhm. Immediacy, instant karma.
Yeah, like it kind of calms all the chaos and entropy of the world.
Now, so my question is then, is the concept of instant karma a dangerous one? Because it would seem to me that, you know, the idea that you laid out here about religious folks allowing destiny and whatever deity they believe in to enact justice either, you know, in the future or in the next life. Is there something dangerous about more and more people wanting to see that sort of retribution immediately instead of allowing for the universe to say to set things right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that, like, especially with religious ideas, like, first, I'm not a theologian. I don't have any of that kind of background, nor was I raised in any church. So I have a very different perspective on things. But I think that, you know, these concepts can be used for good and for bad. And I think when we envision the best parts of religion, it's calling us to be better people. And so I think that releasing the need to enact vengeance makes you a better person. It's the concept of rising above. It's the concept of letting go, walking the higher path, those kinds of things. Because inevitably, even if you were to, like, even if someone were to cause you harm, if you were to cause someone else harm in return, I would say most of us would feel regret over that. I you know, like when you actively seek to hurt another person, that's got to speak more to something in yourself that hurts. And so, yeah, I like the idea of eternal justice, but I also think that, like, well, I don't know. I have to read more Foucault because my whole, like, I've been thinking a lot about, like, you know, society's right to punish and what does that even mean? Because if to discipline is to educate, then why are we punishing people? And if bad actions are a result of trauma and things like that, like, you know, it gets really in the weeds. But yeah, so I don't know. Is my answer.
Oh, okay, cool. That was a very long way of saying I have no idea.
I tell you, man, I know so little. The more I know, it's crazy.
Oh, good. Just discussing ideas.
Oh, yeah.
I think so. I think it's a bit of pattern recognition. Like, we want these things to have logical conclusions, and, you know, cause and effect is highly logical. I also think that, you know, if you take a character like Michael Myers from Halloween, the idea that there's nothing causing him to go to, you know, be this force in nature that kills things, that's what's terrifying about it, because it's an effect without a cause.
Interesting.
And so it definitely speaks something to our human nature to want that. And whether or not man gets to dictate, or humans get to dictate the retribution, there's usually danger when, like, now you are like trying to become God in a way. Like, you are saying, like, the rules of this earth should work like this, and I am the one that enforces them. And that can be dangerous, you know, outside of faith, just in general, because if you have two parties with that same idea, you end up in, like, a blood feud or something, and that's not good for humans as a whole. So cause and effect is, yeah, I think it's good to have that internal justice. It just gets a little dangerous when we're the ones doing retribution, because we're probably pretty bad at retribution, right? We only have one or two ways.
Yeah.
Doing it, you know.
Well, I think it also plays into it, like, like in Cambodia, for example, you can have these like kids, like family members will sell their kids into like prostitution or trafficking. And the kids like so and I say this, there's a woman, her name's Somali Mom, and she rescues child prostitutes. That's not the right word, but you know, kids that are
Child slaves. Let's just
child
say
slaves.
slaves.
Let's just
Yeah.
say that, yeah, because they're not trying to be
No.
there.
Yeah.
But what she said is that like a lot of times these kids are told that they are working off their karmic debt, that this happened to them because of things they did in a past life. And when you're a kid and you're raised in a environment where this is what you're taught, and then an adult tells you this is how it has to be. She's won like a lot of humanitarian awards because she goes in and she gets death threats, and she gets these kids and she teaches them like this isn't how you have to live. You don't deserve this. You deserve better. And but when it gets into your head,
What a hellish representation of humanity.
oh, it's
Yeah.
awful. And
My
she
gosh.
herself, she survived the whole trafficking thing. And so
Mhm.
it's it's one of those things where again, when you're born into these closed systems and isolated from other ways of being, and knowing that you deserve better, like, and at such a young age, it's incredibly damaging.
Well, it's not
So
even knowing that you deserve better. It's not knowing that there's anying else. That's what's most disturbing about that, you know?
yeah, and then
Like the
being
people
afraid
in the
to
spaceship, right? Like they don't know any better. If they're 1,000 years in space, they have no clue what the Earth
right.
looks like. Like,
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's also like the pernicious part about it is to say that like, well, if you don't continue to live this way, you're not ever going to work off some unseen debt. And so I
mhm.
think that those like the fear of the unknown and the hope that the unknown can offer when wielded by man is a very dangerous thing.
Mhm.
Well, it
Yep.
just ends up in messed up situations. And it doesn't help to use kids like that either to like, because they have the most fragile sense of reality, right? And you can pretty much
Mhm.
pump anything into them, and they'll accept it, willy nilly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That gets real dangerous, like real bad, like not even dangerous in the good sense, just bad,
Just
Mhm.
evil.
uh,
I mean, yeah.
malicious, and sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Sorry to bring
awful.
that
I
up.
mean, but that there is something there, because for as disturbed as we are, there is a little bit of us that wants to wipe those people off the map right now, right? And
Mhm.
that is what
The
I was talking
question,
about.
yeah, do we have the right to do that, or do
Of
we
course.
just sit and trust that the
Exactly.
universe will do it for us?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's hard to know. But I also like the less charged point that Mike shared about just humans like patterns.
Hmm.
And I thought that's a really good thing to note too, because again, we can ascribe meaning to things and situations, and that's just pattern divining.
Makes your brain like you're working off of knowledge of your perceptions of the past of whatever thing you're looking at, and you're trying to figure out a pattern of to some sort of cause and effect, right? Like,
Mhm. And it's funny because, like, in evolutionary terms, like, if humans evolved to be smarter so that we can survive the natural world, the brain itself, it works on a memory bank system. Like, it catalogs associations of things, and that's a cause and effect thing that's like very deep in us. So like
Hmm.
fire cooks food, fire keeps me warm,
Yeah.
go to the fire when you see that, like there's all these associations that build up, and then you get burned because of the fire. Okay, fire hurts, and then you have to describe those things to teach the younger generation, so then you develop language to around these things. So I
Yeah,
think
that's a good point.
it's
I think that,
mapping.
there's I think the principle of cause and effect is definitely something that steered humanity to the point that we are now. And understanding cause and effect is what really separated us from the natural world, I guess I'll say.
yeah, and it helped us kind of create a foundation of knowledge that we could build upon and build upon and build upon.
Hmm.
For sure. like if someone goes behind a bush and doesn't come back, it's not like we're going to be the first ones to go check behind that bush.
No, you don't go to that bush anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the evil bush. The
Right.
devil likes that bush. Don't go
Swallow
towards that bush.
people.
Yes.
Well, good. Do you guys have anything else on cause and effect? Do you want to mention?
I think I'm good.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move on to the next and final principle, and this is the principle of gender. No, not the way you guys are thinking. Just this is a much different concept. This is the concept that gender is in everything, and everything has a masculine and feminine principle. Gender manifests on all planes. So the principle of gender embodies the idea that gender is manifest in everything. The authors state that this does not relate explicitly to the commonly understood notion of sex, but rather to beget, to procreate, to generate, to create, or to produce in general. Gender manifests itself on all planes as the feminine and masculine principles. Mental gender is described as a hermetic concept which relates to the feminine and masculine principles. It does not refer to someone's physical sex, nor does it suggest that someone of a certain sex necessarily has to match that mental gender. Ideally, one would want to have a balance of mental gender. The concept put forth in the Kybalion states that gender exists on all planes of existence, physical, mental, and spiritual, and represents different aspects on different planes. Everything and everyone contains these two elements or principles. The feminine principle is always in the direction of receiving impressions and has much more varied field of operation than the masculine. The feminine conducts the work of generating new thoughts, concepts, and ideas, including the work of imagination. The masculine principle is always in the direction of giving out or expressing and contents itself with the will in its various phases. It is said that there must be a balance between these two forces. Without the feminine, the masculine is apt to act without restraint, order, or reason, resulting in chaos. The feminine alone, on the other hand, is apt to constantly reflect and fail to actually do anything, resulting in stagnation. With both the masculine and feminine working in conjunction, there is a thoughtful action that breeds success, which points out that both feminine and masculine fulfill each other. So it's a hot button issue to speak about gender in 2020, but I think that there's something really kind of elevated about this concept. And I'd like to point out and reinforce that they're not necessarily saying that it has to be the sex that you were, born into or anything like that. It manifests itself not just in a physical form, but in mental and spiritual forms as well. And I think that those are the more important aspects of this, because I was really trying to find like examples of gender and nature, and not just, male and female animals, but like this concept of like what would be an embodiment of the divine feminine in nature. And, obviously I get the concept of Mother Nature, Mother Earth, this sort of, life-giving entity that, we all come from, and, concepts of the masculine might be something like Father Time, this mechanism in which reality adheres to. Now, there are obviously other types of masculine and feminine energy manifest in our world. We have things like the moon and the sun. We have things like fire and water. But do you guys have any ideas or any good representations in the natural world of what this concept kind of brings to your mind?
Well, it's interesting that it's an old text. And so, like, to me, it seems like the principles up to now are kind of based on observational experience. So, like, they observe things in nature and then they write about it. So I'm curious to see how this particular one would have changed if they could see certain because what came to mind were like obviously like the opposite, and I'm like, oh, what about those creatures that can like self-replicate, or where the male is the like the male fish or something is the one that gives birth, and like you know what I mean, where there's like the differences and stuff.
Yeah, but I think that's getting hung up on sex.
Yeah, I know. I don't know enough about this stuff to speak in a way that I would feel comfortable with, but yeah, I don't know.
All right. So
It's
I
hot
think
button.
It's not
Well-
that. It's not at all.
No,
Okay.
I know. Well, no, I'm just trying not to like exclude anybody or anything like that.
Nobody's being excluded. We're making no assessments or judgments about any individual right now. We are merely talking about a principle of an ancient idea, and that's it.
I hear that. And you know, it's funny because I was trying to like research some thoughts about this particular one, and I mean, I'm just getting articles that are like 12 pages. So I know there is a lot of information about this for sure.
So I think this is where English has done us a pretty big disservice by removing a lot of gender in our language. So other languages, every object has a gender, right? And you know, these things kind of percolated up towards gendering an idea. And as far as, you know, anything symbolic goes, like the feminine is usually the incubator of things, right? Like the you know, the thing that creates new things, whereas the masculine, like you said, is, you know, one direction, very brutish. Like if you know, if you just use masculine energy to solve every problem, you're pretty much just like like you have a hammer and everything's a nail, pretty much. You can't think outside of yourself.
Right.
Whereas if you start to channel in, you know, the feminine energy, you can, I don't know, maybe push the nail in and then hit it with your hand. I don't know, but like you can start to find different ways around problems. But I think it really comes down to, as far as the hot buttonness of it all, is just English not having gender ingrained into it, because it forces us to think about engendering things in the wrong way, where we only map it to sex.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's
and
not
that's
this abstract notion of masculine and feminine.
Right. And that's what I want to make sure that people understand. We're not really talking about, you know, this is man, this is woman. We're talking about a certain qualia. It's an abstract, energetic qualia that manifests itself in our reality. Now, that doesn't mean every man is going to be the pinnacle of masculinity. In fact, most men have a lot of femininity in them. And actually, a lot of women have masculine traits as well. And the concept here, I think, that is really actually quite wonderful is that the point is to holistically integrate both to be harmonious within yourself, because you have both aspects within yourself as well. So I think that that's a, you know, like a very important idea to embrace these, you know, dualities here. And because we're not just one or the other, there's a mixture. There's, you know, there's areas, there's gray areas in between.
Yeah, sorry. There's a race going on outside. Ooh.
Apparently.
Yeah. And Jung would agree, like integrating both your masculine and feminine side is probably like the highest importance, I would say, for an individual. Just figuring all that out, because you end up working through a bunch of social constructs and a bunch of different social ideas, or just a bunch of ideas given to you. It's not really your own thought, and integrating the feminine with the masculine allows you to look at those ideas and be like, I could waste my whole life trying to argue those ideas, or I could go find this thing that actually matters because I've integrated myself and become a holistic human.
Yeah, I think that that's apt, because, you know, as I said, and you're right about this linguistic pitfall that we find ourselves in, because as I said, I'm really not speaking on the way we speak about it in our 2020 American sort of politic. There's a difference there. There's a qualia, there's an abstraction, you know, and I think it manifests itself in our natural world, and the ability to integrate both is definitely important.
Did you know that in German they didn't have a female word, or like a female or a feminine gendered thing for anything up until like the 1800s? Everything was masculine.
Oh, weird.
All right.
Yeah. No wonder their culture is very like rigid and
German
you know.
humor is no laughing matter.
There you go. That's very true. All right. Well, Ayla, I assume you don't want to touch the rest of this, so we'll probably wrap it up here. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to say?
Just work on cultivating a higher self. It's useful, and like even all the woo woo, just you can entertain an idea without making it a belief or making it some core component. And in Hermeticism, some of these ideas are extremely useful and good for you.
Yes. And I think that there's a good distinction there. Just because we're presenting this information doesn't necessarily mean it's fact. And like there are good bits of wisdom all over the place. And the beauty about life is you get to pick and choose which bits of wisdom work for your life. So
yeah, I like that, and I think that it's just good to seek out interesting texts and kind of like expand your knowledge base and just think about different scenarios and principles and apply them to different situations and things and such. I'm going to end with the such. And such. Yep.
Such. All right. Well, if I think it's time for us to wrap it up. This has been a 2-hour one, you guys. Very nice.
10 minutes.
Wow.
2 hours, 10 minutes. Not too bad. That's
It's funny because at the start of this, I messaged both of the co-hosts here, and I was like, "Did you know that if we allot 12 minutes per principle, then times 7, that's 84 minutes?" I was like trying to be really regimented about it, but I'm glad that we kind of
never works out that way.
You can't do that in conversation.
Yeah, you just kind of got to let it run its course. But no, I definitely appreciate you guys for sticking with me, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I appreciate you guys every time we get to have a chat, and I like your points of view, and yeah. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting.
And thank you all you lovably. Oh my God. I think I'm having a stroke. I talk too much. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for listening out there. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. I know it was a bit longer than our normal ones. Sometimes it just happens that way. Please, if you do enjoy what we do, consider giving us a follow on Instagram, on Facebook, and on YouTube. We're at Exofathom. Leave us some feedback if you have any feedback for us. Other than that, we just really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen. Makes us very happy, and we just want to make sure that we give you guys some good conversations, and hopefully we have some people out there that like to listen to them. So thank you very much again, you guys, and until next time, Cognonauts, you stay out there, and we will catch you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Later.